Hey folks, welcome back. For those of y'all that were just on the stream, for those of y'all who have just joined, welcome to Global Hack Week, and specifically welcome to the Intro to Defang workshop. So today we're going to learn all about Defang, and rather than me or an emulator explaining it, we actually have a co-founder and CTO, Leo Linesu from Defang, joined by team from Defang as well, that will be kicking off this workshop and giving y'all all you need to know about Defang as an introduction. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Leo Linesu.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing today? I'm Leo, the CTO and co-founder of Defang.
Leo, actually, if you let me see if I can edit your mic settings. Let's try that because maybe it's on my end, but I wasn't able to hear you clearly that time.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
A little bit better.
Okay, cool. Well, let's see how it goes. I'm Leo, CTO, co-founder of Defang, and I'll be doing the workshop in any minute.
Great. Looking forward to it. So I'll let you take it away.
Cool. So yeah, Global Hack Week, Cloud. Defang is perfect for this event. So I'm super excited to be kicking off with this first workshop and getting people introduced to Defang and to cloud programming in general. So there's going to be a quick introduction. If somebody has attended last month's Global Hack Week workshop, it's going to be very similar. I'll change it up a bit, some new stuff to show you. Tomorrow, there will also be a workshop, also hosted by me. It's going to be 22 hours from now, so 2 hours earlier, 8 a.m. Pacific time. That one is going to show you all kinds of new stuff. So if you've seen last month's workshop, definitely tune in for tomorrow's. It'll feature a lot of more expert settings that you can use for your project. But this is going to be a simple introduction today. So let's get started. So what is Defang? It's a command line tool. So if you're familiar with command line tools, Defang is one of those. You use them to deploy your project into the cloud. So it's for managing your cloud app. It's following something called the Docker Compose spec. So Docker is another cloud tool that you should be familiar with. Not necessary to know Docker to use Defang. It's just wanted to put it out there. We're using the same kind of technologies, the same kind of files that Docker uses. So if you're familiar with Docker, Defang is going to be super easy for you. a lot of documentation. If you can't find it on the Defang website, check out the Docker or the Docker Compose specifications, documentations. We use the same things as they do. It's a standard, so we use the same standard. In particular, if you're already familiar with Docker, keep using Docker for your local development. Docker is great about, the local tools that they've built allow you to run your application on your local machine, and then use Defang to deploy to the cloud. So keep using Docker if you're familiar with it, but use Defang to take your project and deploy it to the cloud. And so why do you need Defang to do that? So here's a meme, I suppose, that I picked off of Twitter X. So, somebody super excited. They downloaded a new AI editor called Cursor and said, "Oh, everybody can be an engineer now." And then the guy says, "Okay, show me what you built." And then he comes back with a localhost 3000 URL. And some of you might know what that means. Now, localhost is a URL that only works on your local machine. So many tutorials that you'll follow online that are telling you how to build an app, they will at some point refer to localhost, and that's how you can use your own browser to point to your own service running on your own machine, but it's not something that you can give to other people to look at. And so this is where Defang comes in. If you have a project that's working on localhost, Defang is the tool that can package that project and deploy it to the cloud, and you can actually share with other people. You get a URL that works everywhere. So I'll show you how to do that. So what do you need for this workshop? Well, you need a laptop. If you want to follow along, you'll need a laptop or a computer using macOS, Linux, or Windows. Defang works on all three. You'll need some kind of editor. I'll be using Visual Studio Code. You'll need the Defang command line. I'll show you how to install that if you haven't already. It's going to be super easy. You'll need a GitHub account. If you don't have one, you can actually create one during the first login that you'll do. The GitHub gives you the opportunity to create one. But yeah, we use GitHub accounts for the login. So Defang doesn't have like a separate password or anything. We'll use your GitHub account. And some knowledge of the command shell or the terminal and Git is helpful. GitHub, of course, is using a Git, which is also a command line tool like Defang is, for managing source code. And because Defang is a command line tool, a little bit familiarity about the command line, like how to make a directory, how to go into a directory, how to go out of a directory. I'll be using those commands. So if you're not familiar with them, you might want to pay attention or maybe even follow some tutorials after the workshop. So let's get to it. How to install Defang. So the most common ways are these three. The QR code will point you to more detailed instructions. So feel free to go to that QR code. You'll have a lot of other ways of installing. So if you're on Mac and you are using Brew, you can use the first Brew install. If you're on Linux or you have a Mac without Brew, then you can use this one-liner, which basically downloads the installer and runs it for you. And if you're on Windows, we now are in the winget repository. You can use winget install Defang. Super easy to get started. If you're not using winget, follow the QR code and download. You can download the binary like you would any other program. So yeah, if you want to follow along, now's a good time to install. I'll go slow the next few slides to give you some time before we actually start jumping in. So any questions so far? I'm looking at the chat here. So my colleagues are also in the chat. So if you have any questions, either on Discord or in the chat that is part of Twitch here, put it in there and we'll get your questions answered. Cool. Let's get started. So if you have Defang installed, the first thing you want to try is Defang generate. And this is perfect if you don't have a project yet. You're like, I don't know where to start. Get me started. Defang generate is the perfect place. So let's go there. So my screen is good. I have installed Defang. I've used the same installer that we talked about. Let me switch this to the other side like this. So I've installed Defang, and I'm going to do Defang generate. So what this does is it's going to generate a project for me if I don't know where to start. The first question is, what language do you want to use? So pick a language that you're familiar with. Right now, the generator only supports these 3 languages, Node.js, JavaScript, Golang, or Python. So pick any of those. I'm going to go with Node.js because that's what I'm most familiar with. And now you have an option to pick any of these samples. Sorry, the screen looks a bit messy because I'm very zoomed in. So things, they flip around to the new line. But these are all samples that we have from on our GitHub account. So you can pick any of these. You can even type in some keywords. For example, many of you might have heard of Next.js. So you can type in Next.js, and you have here a filtered list of the Next.js samples that we have. I'm going to go with the first option. So the first option is generate with AI, generate a project from scratch, not using a sample, but we're going to use a language prompt to generate a project. Again, people are very familiar with language models now. You have to be careful. Not everything they generate is 100%, right? We know that. So we're going to try this. Then we're going to look at the code and see, does it make sense? Something missing? Let's do that. So now we can use a English prompt. I have a few examples on my slides, actually, like what are good prompts that you can try or use these as inspiration. For example, the first one, a simple service that shows an HTML with hello world. HTML is how the browser shows text. And so, you want to get started with that. That could be a good prompt. A more complicated prompt, like a service with 2 endpoints, one for uploading and the other one for downloading, using Amazon S3. So Amazon S3 is an object store, like a file store. And so this is already getting more complicated, right? Because now your service talking to another service. So it's getting, this is going to be a more complicated example. And last, a fun example that I sometimes use in my demos, an HTTP endpoint that redirects to a random cat picture from the cat API. There's many APIs out there. If you already know an API that does what you want, then tell the generator to use that API. The code will be much higher quality, much better odds of it working than if you just say, oh, I want a random cat picture, and then the AI doesn't really know where to get started. So the cat API is a good API to use for random cat pictures, but there's many APIs out there. For example, if you have a weather API, feel free to use that, right? Say, I want to show the weather in my city using this API. So I'll be using a different prompt. Something fun that I know works well for demos is a HTTP endpoint. On slash, I'll say I want to go to the home page, right? So in the browser, I don't want to have to type some path. I want to go to the home page that returns on HTML with a random meme, and I'll pick one from the image flip API. Again, because I know this API is good, I'll tell the AI to use that API. So it's asking me what folder do I want to use. I'll call this folder random meme, a bit more descriptive than project 1. And so now what's happening now Defang, our service, is taking your prompt and having a dialogue with the language model to actually come with a project generated for you. And actually it opened the browser for me. So here we see the browser with the files that were generated. Let's go back to the command line, and we see, okay, so the random meme, apparently the image flip API needs a username and a password. So we actually said, I enter the username and password for this API right now using these 2 defang config commands. I happen to know that this API works without username password. they'll let you use it very limitedly, but it works well for the demo. So I'm not going to do that. But many APIs will require you to have a username password. So make sure you know you have an API key or something. Back to the editor. So these are the 4 files that were generated. Compose file, a Docker file, main.js, and a package.json. So let's talk about those a little bit more. So we call this a project, right? So what's inside a project? And it depends which language you chose. But there's always going to be a main file, which is like for JavaScript, that's called a main.js. For Python, that's a main.py. And for Go, that's a main.go. It's kind of similar. It's going to have a file that describes the project, like it has dependencies, the name of the project, which version, etc. So that's going to be package.json for JavaScript, requirements.txt for Python, or a Go mod for Golang. And then there's 2 files that are the same for all of the languages. So that is a Docker file and compose.yaml. So we'll talk a little bit about those 2 files as well. So a main.js file generally looks like this, right? You require some libraries. Then you create a little web server, and the web server returns something to your browser. So this is actually the code that gets executed when your browser or your mobile phone connects to your cloud service. So it will actually, in this case, will return some text like, welcome to Defang. And then the code will tell the server to listen. And listening means listening for requests, right? So if you don't listen, you won't hear, right? So before you can reply to the browser asking for, hey, show me this web page, you have to enter this kind of listen mode. And listening happens on a port. We'll talk about more of that later. Let's go back to the project that we generated. So the project that we generated also has a main.js file. You see it looks a little bit different, right? We have different things here. It's still using still requiring dependencies. We have the username password here. So I know we don't need them. So I'm going to comment those out in a second. We have a function called getRandomMeme generated. This looks okay to me. You know, it gets all the memes, then it picks a random number, multiplies that by the number of the memes, and then it rounds down. Yeah, that makes sense to me because random returns a number between 0 and 1. So if you multiply that by the length, you still have like 15.3, which doesn't make much sense. So that you round it down, and it picks the meme 13 in this case. Sounds good. And then here it has, it's listening on the homepage as like I asked it to, and it returns in HTML like I asked it to with the random meme in there. And then at the end, like I said, it's listening for requests on a port. Okay, so this looks plausible. I think the AI did a good job. Good job, AI. So what's about the other files? So the Docker file tells you how to prepare your project. So it's actually how to build the code, how to package it, like what do I need for my project. The result of this Docker file is an image, a container image. An image is a little bit like an archive. Think of it as a zip file kind of thing. So your whole project inside a zip file, ready to deploy, ready to move to another computer, ready to run. A Docker file usually starts from a base. You don't write the whole Docker file yourself. You usually start from an existing one, and then you add your own on top of that. So we'll look what that looks like. Finally, the Docker file tells you the server how to run the program. What is actually the name of your main program file. So let's have a look at the generated file. Right. So we start from the Node.js container image. Because we're a Node program, it makes sense to start with something that Node already built for us, because then we know Node.js is available, anything Node.js needs is available, etc. So this is what the from does. We pick a folder that our app will be running in. We copy our files into that folder. We install any dependencies that we need. Those are all the require on top. You remember, require this, require that. Those are all the dependencies that we need. Then we copy all the other files. So copy ... basically means copy all the files from this folder into all the files inside my container. And here we have the 3000 again. This matches what the code says, right? So in the code, server is listening on port 3000. So in the Docker file, we also say, hey, we are going to be listening on port 3000. And finally, we have, this is how to start our program. We use Node. So of course, we're going to start our program with Node, and the main file is called main.js. So that looks legit. What else? Package.json, the dependencies, Express, body parser, Axios, that matches what we've seen here, right? So these are exactly the dependencies that the AI generated. Finally, we have our compose file. Our compose file, let's talk a little bit about that, what that looks like. We talked about the Docker file. So what is in the compose file? The compose file actually is the description of your whole project. The Docker file describes a single application. Your project could have many applications. It could have a backend, a front end, a database. All of that is in the compose file. The Docker file is for one of those. And so the compose is when you actually start composing your project out of the different services that you need. So a compose file has one or more services, and for each service, it has to answer these two questions. So where's the code for this service? And we'll call that the build context. So how is this service built? Where does the code come from? And then how does the service listen for requests? The same thing that we talked about earlier, right? The ports. So we have to tell where do the requests from the browser, how do they end up in your service? So you have to match that same port. Let's go back to our project. So this is like a hierarchical structure, right? So on top we have services. There's one service called service one, not a very descriptive name, but we won't bother changing that now. And we tell where the source code is, and it says dot. Dot means, of course, the current folder. So because all the files here in the same folder, I can use dot because my files are all there. What is the name of the Docker file? Yeah, the Docker file is called Docker file. That's a normal name, so you not really have to mention this, but it's very clear that you know where the project comes from. So the files are in this folder, and the Docker file describes how to build it. And here we have ports again, right? So we're going to say port 3000 is the port that the server is going to use to listen for requests. Finally, we have the username password. I told you I know that we're not going to need these because I know that the API I'm using doesn't need them. So I'm going to comment these out. So we use the hash sign to comment it out. So now that this project is ready to go, let's go back to our Defang. And I have to go into that new folder that was created, right, called random me. I'm doing Defang, compose, up. So Defang now, when you generate, you don't have to log in, but when you want to deploy, Defang requires you to log in with your GitHub account. And so it says, please log in to continue. I can click this link or copy paste it, or I can just press enter. It will try to open the browser for me, so I'll do that. So here's Defang. It opened the browser for me, and you can see that actually it's already logged in. So because I'm already logged into GitHub, I don't have to log in again. So I can go back to the Defang command. We see, okay, so I'm successfully logged in. We see some warnings. So these are things that are missing from the compose file. You can either follow the documentation. It will tell you how to address these, or yeah, you can follow the hint. So we didn't tell our service how much memory it needs. Defang has no way of guessing how much memory our service needs. So it says, hey, if you don't tell us how much memory we need, then you're going to get very little, and you might not be enough. Finally, it tells us we don't have a health check. So Defang has no way of knowing whether the service is healthy or not. That means that, you know, if we make a bug, Defang doesn't really know if the service is healthy or not. For now, these are fine. We can address them later. It also shows the link in our portal. So we can copy paste that and go to our portal. So this is our portal, portal.defang.dev. I need to log in with GitHub, so nothing new there. So let me paste the URL that we saw. I'll log in with GitHub. And here, so this is the portal where I can also monitor what my service is doing. We can see here the status is orange, service deployment in progress. I can see the port 3000, that's where the service is listening. I can see also that Defang generate a URL for me. And so this is a URL that you can copy paste and give to your friends. And they can actually go there and look at the service when it's up and running. So from that tweet, remember somebody saying, hey, look at my site, localhost 3000. Of course, it doesn't work on anybody's computer other than his own. This would actually work on everybody's computer. So let me copy paste that. Oh. Okay. You can just open that in a new tab. Oh, here we go. So this is the site that we just deployed, random meme. And if I refresh, I keep getting random memes. So let me also paste this in the chat so you guys can see what, nothing up my sleeves. This actually works. HTTPS. Oh, okay, because actually URLs are not allowed, so you guys will have to type it in. I'll create a QR code for you. Oh, let's see. Here we go. Namely pickle. So you can go to this site instead. Yeah. So every time we refresh, it'll show a random meme. Yeah. So that, how long did that take us? Right. We're like 20 minutes in the workshop, and we have a random site generated from scratch. And here you see the same, right? So what you can see in the portal, you can also see in the command line. It's just like, what do you prefer? To make changes, you need to use the command line. You cannot click in the portal. The portal is just a read-only view. You can see that your service is healthy. You can look at the logs. You can see logs here. You can click on the link, but you cannot make any changes. You use the command line to make changes. And that's important. I'll show you later in the presentation. Cool. You guys have any questions? Yeah, the API was image flip. Yeah. Yeah, so the API keys, I see Rogue 47. API keys, it depends on your service. So if you have a service that needs API keys, then you probably need to log in, make an account with the service, sometimes paid, sometimes free. They will give you credentials that you then put in your project. So I can show you how to do that. Actually, the command line, the Defang tool, tells you how to do that. For example, if I were to use a username password, I would have to do defang config create username and defang config create password. I'll show you what happens if I type that in. It doesn't hurt, right? So it says enter a value for image flip username, and then I would say here maybe my name, and this would take the value, put it in the cloud. So when your service runs, it has access to these values. And same for the password, right? You would use defang config create password to store the password securely so that the service can access it. And the service can access it if you add it to your compose file, right? So in your compose file, if you need a username password, you would add it like this. And in your main file, you would use them like these, image username, you would get them out securely. But you can actually see that the code that the AI generated does not actually use. That's why they're gray. They're not actually used in this file. So yeah, you can give them a value, but in this case, it's not used. So check your code and check your API, the API that you're using. They might need an API key, and then you have to make an account and get an API key. All right. So we talked a bit about the compose file. You have services, maybe only one. You have to explain where the source code is, so the build context, and you have to explain in the compose file, you have to say where the requests go, which port the requests go to. And Defang compose up is all you need to get started in the cloud. And so what if things go wrong? Clearly, you know, everything went well. The AI generated code went well. And so compose up worked from the get-go. So what if it doesn't work? Well, it depends where it goes wrong, right? If you have a mistake in your compose file, what is very helpful is take an editor that knows about compose. Visual Studio Code knows about compose if you install the YAML extension. You can also use Docker. Again, Docker, you don't have to use it, but you could use it for local development. So use that to test your compose file. If you have a mistake in your Docker file, similarly, Visual Studio Code has a Docker extension. It will help you with the Docker file, or you can use Docker. So let me show you what that looks like, right? So if you go to Compose, you can actually see here that Visual Studio Code knows about the Compose file. So if I make a mistake, for example, if I move this to the left or the right, Compose, you know, where you put stuff is very important. So because it's a hierarchy, right? And now you see all those squigglies appear because the thing is on the wrong place. Or I make a typo. You can actually hover over it and it tells you proper restart is not allowed. So it has to be restart. Same with Docker file. You can see the coloring. It knows about Docker file. So if I make a typo here, I get a red squiggly, and then I can fix it. If you make mistakes in your application code, again, you can try to use Docker locally to test it out before you deploy with Defang. Or, and this is what I want to demo next, you can use our AI debugging assistant. So let's try that. Let's make a mistake and see what happens. For example, yeah, these two files are not used, right? So what if I comment these files, I comment these two things out, I go to my Defang compose up to deploy this update. Oh, because I had uncommented these, right? So now Defang says, hey, you need to add a password. You added a username, but not a password. But I don't need them, so I'm going to comment it out. Okay. So I made some changes in my main file, and I'm asking Defang, okay, deploy the new changes. As usual, I can follow along in the portal. We can see that we went from green to red because we're back to building. And so now the build is pending, and then we'll start build. We can follow along in the portal, or we can follow along in the command line. We can follow along here. So by default, a lot of the details will not be shown. If I press V, I'll go to verbose mode, and then you can see a lot of logs. It'll be similar to, sorry, it'll be similar to the portal. So yeah, all of this stuff, right? It's going to be very similar. So yeah, now we'll wait for this new change to appear. So it go to orange means that the build has succeeded, and now we're deploying to the cloud. So this is actually where Defang finds a server for your code to run on. Right? So that'll take a while. Let's go back. And now we wait for the service to be healthy. You can see as soon as I turned on verbose mode, I started getting more logs. By default, I won't get these detailed things. These are super technical. You'll do that if something goes wrong. That's when you will want to see, hey, is there maybe some information in there that I haven't caught. Object storage. So Defang, we don't have our own object storage, but we can help you connect to Amazon or other object storage out there. Defang is really about your service. If you want to have an object storage or a database or a cache, you'll have to find those services. And we can help you provision them. We can help you connect them. At the moment, we can do that for Redis and Postgres. So you can go to your compose file and connect. You say you need Redis, and then we'll help you connect to a Amazon Redis or another Redis. But object store, yeah, you'll have to find your own service for now. Tomorrow's workshop, I'll be talking about that. So tomorrow's workshop is more about bring your own cloud, bring your own domain. Like I want to use my own account instead of today we're using the Defang account, right? When I use Defang compose up, it'll go to Defang's cloud, and tomorrow we'll tell you more about your own cloud. Our deployment has failed. Look at our screen. Our deployment has failed, and we say, okay, I need some help. Do you want to use the AI debugger? Let's go for it. So what this will do, it will actually take a snapshot of your project and ask the debugger, hey, what went wrong? And it comes back with some recommendations. Oh, it's already done. So let's see what it says. The log output indicates that the build and deployment process was mostly successful, but there's a critical error in main.js. It prevents the service from running. Specifically, there's a syntax error due to the use of hash before the const keyword, which is not valid JavaScript. Okay, so it actually gives me updated main.js telling me how to fix my file. So let's go to the editor. Yeah, I wanted to comment these 2 lines, but I used the wrong comment. I used the comment from the compose file actually, or even Python uses this comment. So I should be using this comment, the // So this is where the AI debugger is super helpful. These are the kind of things that can consume like 5, 10, 30 minutes because you don't know where to look. So now that we fix the issue, we can deploy again. Of course, there's other ways of debugging. Not every the AI debugger will catch the situations where your service doesn't deploy, right? It's not live, the URL doesn't work, and so what do you do when the service is up and running and the AI debugger thinks, yeah, everything looks fine, but you know it doesn't do what you expected, right? So this is where you can use Defang tail, and as the name suggests, it actually will show you the last part of your logs. It will keep showing the last part of the logs. So let's have a look what that looks like. So here we're still deploying. Actually, even though I'm still deploying, but I know there's no changes, right? Because I only commented those 2 files. So basically, the what tail will show you is exactly what the portal will show you. It's the same logs. So here the update, the deployment succeeded. I can quit this at any time. The debugger says, hey, the deployment is not successful. Do you want to debug? I pressed Control-C, which stops, aborts the logging, right? So I don't need to have the AI debugger kick in because I'm the one that stopped it. Even though I stopped it, the process will still continue, right? So everything happens in the cloud. Once you do Defang compose up and Defang uploads your project to the cloud, that's it. Your computer is out of the picture. It will still show you what's going on, but you can disconnect Wi-Fi, close your computer, take a flight, doesn't matter, right? As soon as you do Defang compose up, everything happens in the cloud. In fact, this is a Node project, but I don't even have Node. So because everything happens in the cloud, the Node will be downloaded in the cloud, your project will be built in the cloud, dependencies will be downloaded in the cloud. So your computer is literally just packaging it up, sending it to the cloud. And actually, so I wanted to demo Defang tail. The CLI already tells me how to use it, right? So I pressed Control-C to abort the deployment. It says, hey, I detached, but the process will keep running. And if you want to continue from where you left off, you can actually just copy paste this line. So it will say Defang tail since exactly the timestamp that I pressed Control-C, right? So if you use this, you will never miss any logs. And then it also says e-tag, which is kind of the unique deployment that we're doing. So you can see here, when I did Defang compose up, it gave me a unique number, C6RMQE8, blah, blah, blah. And so I want to see logs related to that particular compose up. I can add that. Yeah, so basically I get exactly the same, exactly where I left off, right? So the last log here is exactly the one that I see here. So, and the server is up and running again. Yeah, nothing changes, the same URL. So we can click on it, but yeah, we know already that there will not be any difference. We'll get a new meme. Cool. So I want to take at least 15 minutes for questions and answers, so I can show you a few more things. What's next? So Defang Generate also allows you to check out our samples. You can go through the samples with Defang Generate. So maybe we take a few minutes to do that. You can add your own domain name. I will show you that tomorrow. So if you're interested on how do I use my own domain, tomorrow 8 a.m. PT, check your local time, and basically 2 hours before this one. Tomorrow, but 2 hours before this one. Yeah, we'll show you how to use your own domain name. So instead of this long Leonello-service1, you can have your own name. And then we'll also show how to deploy to your own AWS account. So you say, hey, that's cool, but I don't want my service running on Defang. I want you to use Defang as a deployment tool, which is the main purpose of Defang. So deploy to my own account, because I want to be in charge. I want to control who has access. I want to control where the logs go. We'll show you that tomorrow. So for now, one more thing I definitely want to show today is browsing or samples on our website. So defang.io is our website. It also has those installers that I mentioned in our slide earlier. So depending on whether you want to use Brew, the shell, Windows, or you even have Nix. But I want to show you the samples. So here you can browse our samples as well as the Defang Generate. Remember, you can browse samples there as well. So for example, let's take I want to deploy a Flask app. Yeah, so we could take a Flask app, for example, a Python REST API. And this is new, one-click deploy. So what that does, when you press one-click deploy, it actually deploys the sample immediately. You don't even need to download anything for that. The way it works is it'll go send you to GitHub, which is what we're looking at now. It'll send you to GitHub, where you have the opportunity to fork the repository of the sample. Forking a repository for GitHub means you basically make your own copy of somebody else's code. It asks you for a name, so you can click the green thing as a auto-generated name, and then you can create that repository. Before I do that, Defang, our free playground, which is the one that I use for this sample, right, is free, but only allows one project. So before I press create here, I'm gonna do a Defang compose down to stop the current project. So my link will stop working. And I need to do this because our free playground only allows for one project at a time. We don't want to be abused. We want it to be something very useful for people to get started and get familiar with the tool. And so to avoid abuse, we'll have this limited place, unfortunately. So Defang compose down takes down the project that we built, the random meme project. But now, because that is done, I can go back to GitHub and I can say fork this sample. So let's do that. So now GitHub creates a copy in my own account of this sample. It has the name that I gave it, Laughing Octo Fortnite. But what's really cool is that this will get deployed immediately. So as soon as you press that button to make your own copy, immediately it'll start a deployment to Defang, and you can follow along in GitHub. So GitHub, each sample has a GitHub action. That action starts immediately, and the action is to deploy. And you can actually see that the action is using Defang the way we would, right? So it's using Defang compose up after a Defang login, so it logs you in. And then now it's doing the same that the Defang compose up does. So packaging it, sending it to the cloud, and waiting for the service to be healthy. Again, we can follow along in the portal. And here we are. The build is queued. It will start building. We have a new URL, different from the one before. This is for the Flask project that I started. And all of this is without downloading any tool. And what's more, now I have my own repository. I have my own copy of the sample. I can now make changes. And I don't even need a editor or any tools to make changes. So I can go to my app here. I can go to the main Py file. This is a Python example, so it's a little different than the Node.js example. And I can, yeah, maybe I change something. So this API shows this example actually shows the interest rate, apparently. Well, it's going to be fun. So yeah, why don't I make a change here? For example, it says that on the homepage, it will show status okay. Why don't we make that something else? Why don't we make that, I want to make that health okay. I can commit changes. So I made a little change using, I didn't use an editor, I didn't download any tools. I just use Defang. So we go to the portal. See, it's still built pending. So that is because I did a Defang compose down. So the previous one is still getting deprovisioned before it starts uploading this one. And to confirm, we can follow along here. Remember, you can see, yeah, so we can see the deprovisioning happened. So once this is done, the new service will start deploying. All right, so while this runs, yeah, let's look if there's any questions. Too much information. Yeah, sorry about that. So a lot of these are also on our YouTube channel. I know MLH will share them. Feel free to rewatch them. Send us questions, join our Discord. You can, all of that is here in the portal. There's a link to our Discord, link to our community. Ask us questions there. We are very eager to help. AWS deployment is free, yes. We're now in beta, and we'll be in beta for all of this year. So this year, knock yourself out. There will always be a free tier. We don't know what that looks like yet. So for now, everything is free. We'll decide what the free tier looks like based on complexity, based on how much time does it take us to actually keep these features running. But for now, we really want your input. We want to make a tool by developers for developers. This is the tool that we wish we had, 10 years ago. And so hopefully this gets people introduced to the cloud and up and running with new projects quickly. All right, cool. So I see somebody has deployed something. If you have deployed something during this workshop, and if you feel up to it, share the URL with us in one way or the other. Maybe use Nounly. I know that if you paste in the chat, it won't work, but I'm very eager to find out what you guys built. Why did I comment out the environment variables? That's because I know that it works without it. Oh, inside here, actually, this was just to show the AI debugger. I made a mistake on purpose. So I used the wrong character to create like a syntax error. But this has happened to me. So, these are things, these kind of typos, especially going between different languages, different files. You jump between YAML and JS and Python. These are mistakes these happen, and the AI debugger will have your back. So these commenting these out, yes or no, makes no difference because they're unused. And why they're unused is because I know that this particular API, image flip API, works without credentials. So most APIs will require you to go to the website, register, create an account, create a token, copy paste the token. You have to do a bunch of stuff like that. But this API doesn't need that, so that's why it worked fine. You can see our Python app is actually being built right now. What else we got here? Okay, so just a hello world. Cool. Also, Rogue has shared his URL. Let's have a look. Cool. Hey, that's awesome, man. And once you have this up and running, you can just make changes, and it's going to be very easy to iterate on it and maybe use something like Copilot or Cursor or Tab9, to help you iterate on it. Defang helps you really with the start, the deployment, and the debugging. To do your actual development day to day, you use an assistant, an AI assistant or something. So still waiting for this Flask app. You can see that Flask definitely has a lot more work to do to build the app than Node.js. So it's been building for a few minutes now, but I can see its deployment in progress. So as soon as this turns green, we should be good to go. An extension, is there a UI extension for Defang in Visual Studio Code? Not yet. You're not the first to ask for it. So definitely something we need to spend time on. I think it would be a great idea to have that completely integrated in your development environment. I think it's a good idea. So I see somebody shared a link that doesn't work, astroxyphilio. So usually why that happens is because the AI might have used a path, right? So imagine here it's using slash, but if the AI did something like meme, then you need to go to that subpage as well. You will have to point your browser to that subpage. So actually our Python example, let's go back to Python. Actually, it's up and running. So see this is the slash. So in our Python example, remember I changed status to health in the browser, right? I didn't download any editor. I didn't download any defang tool. In the browser, I changed my code, and the code is already changed in the cloud. So let's go back to the actual code. You can see that the sample uses /rates for the actual rates. So you will have to type in that part yourself. So you can go click the link, and then you have to add /rates because that's what the code does. Oh, and you see here, it actually shows the interest rates for the different years. That's pretty cool. So you get a JSON. This is obviously meant to be computer readable, machine readable. So you'll have to add a little bit more code to the sample to make this pretty, maybe add a graph. Yeah, so the sample is very bare bones. Shows you how to get started, shows you how to write something in Python, how to get data from another service. This is the Treasury API. And then it shows this machine readable JSON format. And now you can add your own code to make it pretty, right? So yeah, so here you have the code that actually takes the information from the Treasury API, but returns it as is. It doesn't try to make a graph out of it. So this is where you would add your own code somewhere in the middle of this. How do I set up the Defang CLI? Yeah, so go to our homepage. The most common ways to send up the CLI are right on our homepage. So click your preferred way of installing. We also show a little demo on the side here. So if you're on macOS, on Linux, or even on Windows Linux, you can install Ubuntu on Windows, then you can follow this guide, or yeah, just copy paste one of these. There's a copy paste button, a copy button right here, so you can copy from there. You can go to the docs. So in our documentation, we have more information about getting started and installing the CLI. So they describe the three common ways, but it also has this one. So direct download, you can download the binary, you copy it on your machine in a place that you are familiar with, and you use it like that. We have 5 more minutes, folks. So yeah, tell us how we can help you. Okay, I see that changing the path helped Astrophilio. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, you have to check the code, right? The code says you have to go to /rates, then your browser has to go to /rates. So these are things that you have to be familiar with. So we're still here a few minutes to answer your questions. A quick revision of this session. Yeah, so this session, I showed those three things: develop, deploy, and debug with Defang. I showed you how to install Defang. Go to the defang.io website. We'll have the installation instructions right there. To start your development, you use Defang generate. Again, Defang.io website. It has the command right there, Defang generate. You can choose to start from a sample. You can choose to start from a English language prompt. Then to deploy, you use Defang compose up. That will package your sample or your generated code and send it to the cloud. And that's where it actually becomes a container. Defang does all the magic to find a server for you, put your code on there, run it, and returns a URL. And that URL you can share with your friends. So it's already up and running in the cloud at that point. And then finally, when things go wrong, if things go wrong during deployment, the Defang AI will kick in automatically. So it will say, hey, something went wrong. Your service didn't deploy successfully. Do you want me to debug? Yes, no. And you get a chance to use the AI debugger. I also showed Defang tail. That is to show logs from an application that you already deployed. So you want to see, hey, something went wrong. My friend told me that an hour ago he couldn't use the website. You can go Defang tail -- since 1h 1 hour, and you can see if there's something in the logs, right? So that's basically Defang tail since 1 hour, and it would show you things that happened as of 1 hour ago for your application. So those are the three things that I touched upon today: getting started with your development, deploying, and debugging your application. Tomorrow we'll go in depth. So tomorrow it's all about, okay, cool, I want my own domain name. We'll show you how to do that. Okay, cool, I want to use my own server, and we'll show you how to do that. So tune in tomorrow, 8 a.m. Pacific time. It's going to be, same start time as this, 2 hours before this one started today. So whatever your local time is, this one started at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Tomorrow will be 8 a.m. Pacific time. So join our Discord. Link is on the screen. Ask us questions there. We also have a channel in the MLH Ask Defang. So you can also go to MLH Ask Defang. We'll be there throughout the day and tomorrow to answer any questions. Machine learning. Yeah, actually, there is one sample that we have on our website that shows how to run your own language model. So if you browse samples, that one is actually using VLLM. So you can even deploy that sample. You can deploy it using the CLI, or you can even do one-click deploy. Now, again, this one needs a GPU. So GPUs are quite expensive. We will, try our best to find a GPU for you, but the Playground service, the free Playground service, very likely does not find a GPU for you. If you want to use GPUs, tomorrow's workshop is perfect for you. You can bring your own cloud, and you can use a GPU on Amazon. We can even tell you how to do it so it doesn't break the bank. This is called using something called the spot market. Spot market is kind of the secondary market for GPU resources. So you can get a GPU for like 50 cents, 5 cents an hour, this kind of money. You can deploy your own language model. So we can show you that tomorrow. Cool. I see my colleagues are answering your questions as well. So yeah, that's all I had, folks. So this has been awesome. I think thanks people that have been sharing their URL. Super cool to see what you all are deploying at in real time as we're having the workshop. I think that's super cool, super encouraging. Keep at it. After this workshop, the Defang documentation is still there. Will be in the Discord channels. monitoring for questions. We'll get you started if we need to. I know at some point this video will be up on YouTube. I don't know how long that takes though. I'll check with MLH to get more information about that. I'll make sure this will be available for rewatching later. But yeah, this has been super fun. Looking forward to tomorrow, 8 a.m. Pacific time. We'll do bring your own domain, BYOD, and bring your own cloud, bring BYOC. So that's going to be hardcore. And I hope this was a good introduction for people that have never used cloud before, you know, to go from something on your local machine and actually be in the cloud where you can share with your friends, I think is a huge step. So I hope people can get to try that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leo. Thanks everyone for joining. Also, if you want to hang around on stream, we have another stream coming up right after this. But thanks again. This has been great.
Cool. Well, that was a great session. Thanks.
Take care.